And welcome. Thank you for joining this session. It'll be a 1-hour overview of the Youth Employment Experience program and the application process, since applications for the 2022 year are now open. This is a program that is run by the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, CPRA. And my name is Erin Love. I'm the National Project Manager at CPRA. So today we'll talk about the program overview for the Youth Employment Experience program, how to apply to the program, some important details, and then we'll have a chance to ask some questions, and I'll invite you all to join the regional manager for your region in a breakout room so you can connect with them and ask any questions you may have along the way. Just by show of hands, if someone has experience with this program before, I would invite you to click down at the bottom of your Zoom screen and raise your hand. Maybe you were a 2021 applicant, maybe you were a 2021 recipient of the program. This will give us some idea of who is sort of familiar and who is brand new to the program this year. Wonderful, thank you. And it's nice to see so many people are familiar, and welcome to those for whom this is brand new. I hope you find this workshop valuable. So to start with the program overview, the program, of course, is called the CPRA Youth Employment Experience. And this program is funded by the Government of Canada through their Youth Employment and Skills Strategy program. And I would just ask that everyone mute their microphones if they're watching, just so that we don't have feedback coming in through the speakers. Thank you. The goal of this program is to build skills in Canada's youth in parks and recreation. So we really want to start developing our next generation of leaders and help support them, especially in this hopefully post-COVID environment, in getting engaged in the sector and contribute in a meaningful way. Details about the program can be found here on our CPRA website. This is the direct link to the program overview. So this program launched in January 2020. So we are 1 year and a little bit into the delivery of this program. And we did have about 75 to 80 youth engage with us in the last year. That is spread out across Canada. In every province and territory, we've had some engagement. And over the 3-year program, we hope to engage 350 youth in this program, or perhaps even more. The program provides 100% wage subsidies up to $10,000 for the youth's working term. And in addition to that, we also have support for mentorship. So the mentor also, who is supporting the youth through this work experience, has the ability to claim some of that time as well. In addition, there are additional supports available on a case-by-case basis to support the youth and to ensure their success in the program. One important piece of information that you would need to know as an applicant is that these subsidies and these supports are paid after the work term. So the community would be responsible for paying the wage subsidy and for supporting the mentor. And then once the work term is complete, they submit their claim to CPRA for reimbursement. So the goals of the program, of course, is employment. So we want to support about 350 or more youth in this program. We want to ensure that there's a mentorship component to each project. So that's not just direct supervision. That's really more of an investment in the mentor and the mentorship role and relationship that mentors have with youth. We want to build skills. So skills building is a nice big piece of this project, and that comes directly from the Youth Employment Skills Strategy funding initiative. Of course, we're reaching youth, and in particular, those who are facing barriers. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a few minutes. and then support to our communities, to the parks and recreation sector as a whole across Canada. We know that we've been hard hit from COVID, and in the next few years, we really want to make sure that our communities are supported and able to invest in youth. So I've said the word communities a lot. The list of eligible applicants can be municipalities, cities and towns, villages, regional districts, Indigenous communities, Indigenous governments, and other nonprofit organizations who deliver parks or recreation programming on behalf of the local government. We ask here for a letter of support from nonprofit organizations just to ensure that they are in fact reaching the broader community in their immediate area. For youth, there are 4 main eligibility criteria for the youth who would be involved in this program. The biggest one, of course, is their age. So at the beginning of the work term, the youth must be between the ages of 15 and 30 years old. That is 15 and 30 inclusive. So they can be 30, they can be 15, but they cannot be 14 turning 15 soon, nor can they have just turned 31. That would make them ineligible. The youth must be Canadian citizens or permanent residents or protected person as defined by the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. They must be legally required or entitled to work in Canada, and also legally entitled to work within their province or territory. From the Government of Canada's website, the youth who face barriers often include, and there's a whole host of inclusionary criteria, but by no means is this list exhaustive. CPRA encourages our communities who participate in this program to hire youth who would otherwise face barriers to employment. And when we get into the application form, we'll explore what that looks like in further detail. But again, I'd like to reiterate that this list is certainly by no means exhaustive. There are many barriers that youth are overcoming right now, and certainly we want to make sure that we're supporting them to do so. Eligible funding. So as mentioned before, there's up to $10,000 in funding available per youth. This is inclusive of wages and other mandatory employment related costs. So those would be things like CPP and EI in lieu of benefits, percentages in lieu of vacation, etc., as you would pay a regular employee in your workplace. There are also allowances of up to $4,000 per mentor to support their involvement in this program. So at the end of the work term, we ask for details on the wages paid to the youth. We also ask on the details of number of hours that the mentor has contributed to the program and their hourly rate, and that subsidy for the mentor is determined that way. As mentioned, additional funds may be available on a case-by-case basis to support the youth or the mentor through this work experience. There may be adaptations or supports required at the physical, excuse me, at the physical workplace that are required to support the youth. There may be accommodations that are needed. The youth may require support for transportation or childcare in order to participate and to be involved in a work experience such as this. So those case-by-case requests would go through the regional manager to CPRA. Few other administrative details. Work terms can vary in length, anytime between 4 weeks and 6 months. They must be complete by March 31, 2023. And youth are encouraged to work full-time, part-time, or casual hours, whatever works for their schedule and for your schedule. And we've seen this, especially in light of rolling closures across the country in the past year. This flexibility has been very welcomed by communities participating in the program. So some important dates. Of course, the application deadline date, February 17th, which is just coming up in a couple of weeks. We will review all of the applications that come in, and notices of decision will be issued by March 15th. And then the youth are encouraged to start working as early as April 1. So if you're starting to plan for your spring terms, your summer terms, that is the earliest start date. And I'll just emphasize here again, the application deadline, February 17th. Our application portal will close at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to submit their application on that day. All right, how to apply. So as I mentioned, the direct CPRA link for the program is cpra.ca/mentorship. But just by visiting cpra.ca, it will take you to this landing page. If you hover over the funding text, it will create a drop-down menu, and then you can go right here to application form, and that will take you right to the application form. Applications are submitted or are to be submitted online only, but there is a PDF of the application form that's available on the website, and my colleague Gabriella is going to put it into the chat here as well, so that you have a quick and easy access to the PDF version, so you can start to plan your application. If submitting online is a challenge for you or for your community, I encourage you to reach out to your regional manager. And they can assist with that. So this is what the application form looks like. We'll go through it. I've taken screenshots for every question. So we will go through each of them, all of the parts, and we'll take a look at, some areas where there are sometimes some troubles or concerns, and we can address those. So part 1 is about your contact details for your organization. So the name of the application, applicant organization, and the type. So here we would ask you whether or not you're a community, a city, a town, or a non-for-profit. If you indicate that you're a not-for-profit organization, another pop-up will occur, and you will be asked to upload your letter of support from the local government. Contact information, of course, fairly standard stuff. Website, if you have one, is always nice. And the primary contact for the organization, their coordinates. I would encourage everyone just to double, triple check the email address for the primary contact. Sometimes we get some typos in there and then we can't reach you. So this has happened a couple of times. It doesn't happen very often, but do just make note to triple check the email address when you submit. We ask you how you found out about the program, and then that is the end of the contact details section. At the end of every section, you'll be encouraged to hit the save button, which is right here. That save button will generate a pop-up that will send you a link directly to your email. So again, making sure that that email address is correct. And you can go back and revisit and rework your submission at any time. When you click next, you'll be taken to part 2, which is the funding request. So this is a big part of the application. This is where you actually talk about the job that the youth will do. So we talk about number of jobs requested here. We allow only one application per organization. You may submit requests for up to 2 youth. So there will be an option to add a second request to your application, but we ask that only one application come in per community, and that just allows us to manage the flow of applications better. The text at the bottom here talks about a brief job description. That's going to come on the next screen, but really what we want to talk about is what does a typical day or week look like for this youth, and what tasks will they be responsible for? So that's right here in this box. There's about 200 words approximately to answer this question. So we don't need 200 words. Certainly we don't need a very long description, but we do need to have a clear picture of what the youth will be doing during their work term. And the other important piece here is how will this job support youth to build their skills? So what kind of skills building opportunities will there be in this work experience? I see that there's a hand raised. I'm going to ask that you either put your question into the chat or save it until the end when we break out to the regional managers. The next questions, we'll talk a little bit more about how youth can expand their networks, how they can get more involved with parks and recreation sector. But really the funding request makes up about 40% of the score on an application. So really do think long and hard about how you want to articulate what the youth is going to do and how this will build their skills. This is a really important part of the application. Also part of the funding request, we ask about start dates and end dates. These are not, by no means are you bound to them, but they help us plan better the flow of work terms, who we can sort of expect. We also don't want to be bugging you all the time in June if you're not planning to hire until October. So just let us know when you anticipate that start date will happen. And the end date again can be 6 months later, but no later than March 31st, 2023. There's details there about whether or not the youth will work full-time or part-time, how many hours you think they're going to work, and sort of the anticipated overall cost. Again, this is by no means are you bound to these numbers, but it helps us budget and make sure that if for some reason there might be additional funding, we can offer some of that funding to support an extra youth or two. One little area where sometimes there's some trouble and we get some questions is here in the total anticipated salary. Please just enter the number value. Do not enter the $sign. It will show an error if you enter any characters. We just want the numbers. And again, that handy little save button as you go along will always be available at the bottom of the screen to save your work. This next piece is part 3 on youth engagement. So here we ask exactly what efforts your organization will take to reach youth in the hiring process, and especially youth who are facing barriers to employment. So this piece of the application makes up about 30% of the score. So we really want to make sure that communities are intentional and thinking about perhaps unique ways of reaching youth in their communities who might benefit from this experience. The text that you see highlighted in blue, youth who face barriers to employment, there in the middle of the screen, that's a hyperlink. That'll take you to the definition from the Government of Canada if for some reason you can't recall it from this webinar. And again, by no means are those lists exhaustive. There are many, many, many barriers that we all face, but these are just some examples of things to consider in your outreach. And I will plug again that save button for you as you go along. Part 4 is the mentorship piece. Mentorship is a big component of this program. We've touched on it a few times. So here we ask to detail the mentor experience. This is the other 30% of the total 100% score for an application. So again, put some thought into this. You'll see there's only 150 words allocated. So we don't need paragraphs and paragraphs, but we want to have a good understanding of exactly what supports will be available to the youth during their work experience. So an example of a weak response in this area might be the youth will be supervised by their supervisor when they're at work. We've received responses like that before, and those would be an example of a low score response. Something that would receive a higher score would be, we've had mentorship opportunities before. The mentor will meet with the youth regularly to talk about their skills building, and we'll set a plan in place to develop, skills where needed and that kind of thing. We ask whether or not your organization has previous experience offering mentorship opportunities to employees. There's no right or wrong answer here. We're really just exploring everyone's experience with mentorship. And then we ask a few more questions about whether or not there's capacity for additional support and how you might go about selecting a mentor for this youth. So it really just, these are prompt questions to help you think about this mentorship opportunity and component of the program. Successful applicants will be invited to participate in some mentorship training through Mentor Canada and CPRA. So we do, if there is limited experience with mentorship, we certainly are able to support your organization in establishing something there. And again, this is the end of the mentorship section, asking about additional supports. Again, this is the piece that I touched upon a couple of times, that there is additional funding to support on an as needed basis. And that's something that we encourage communities or recipients to think about. If there are ways we can better support this youth that might not be available directly through the community, but if that's something CPRA can support, we would be happy to do so. And that save button again. Finally, there's a declaration session. So just really to make sure that organizations know that there will be some reporting as part of this grant program. We've had, the feedback we've received to date is that the reporting is quite minimal and easy to access. So that's good. Please don't feel daunted by a reporting requirement. We really just ask at the end of the work term to submit the claim form and talk about what you've actually did. The impact on them, the impact on the mentor, the impact on the community. We ask that no other federal funding will support the positions proposed in the application. So in a wage match situation, this would be something like a 50-50 split of funding. Because this youth employment experience pays 100% of the wage subsidy for the youth, we just ask that you're declaring that you're not actually seeking additional funding for that youth. And then we ask that the youth not be replacing an existing employee or filling a position left vacant due to some sort of workplace action, et cetera. And this is an opportunity to submit a signature, oops, sorry, and to save, and then finally submit your application to CPRA. I talked a little bit about the evaluation criteria as we went along. The skills building component makes up about 40% of the application score. The demonstration of outreach to youth in your community is approximately 30%, and then the consideration for mentorship is the final 30%. Everything, of course, will be viewed with a lens to make sure that it aligns with the spirit and the intent of the program, really to be building the next generation of leaders in Parks and Recreation. Here's some feedback. I will just hold this slide here for a moment. This is from a community that participated this year in 2021. And it just speaks to the success of the program in their community, the success with an otherwise challenging relationship, and really are highlighting that this is and can be beneficial both for youth and for communities and for organizations. And it has many, many benefits beyond just a wage subsidy program. So now it will be time for questions. I see there's a few of them in the chat, so perhaps we have about half an hour left. So I will answer the chat questions first, and then I will invite everyone to go to a breakout room where you will be meeting with the regional managers. So we're lucky today, all 5 regional managers are here on the call with us. and they'll all be part of an open discussion in a breakout room where you can ask them questions, you can connect with them directly, talk about, maybe project proposal that you might have, or an idea that you're sort of bouncing around in your head. Would this be a good fit for the program? Or do you think that might be beneficial? All of those questions, they'd be happy to answer and happy to support you as you explore this opportunity. So I will just go through the questions. The first question was, are we able to bring back youth who were with us last year in this program? The answer to that is yes. Youth who were involved in the program last year are eligible to be part of the program again starting April 1st, 2022. The second question, how do we indicate in part 2 that youth will start part-time or casual and then move to full-time afterwards? Good question. I would, in the wage portion where you put in the funding request, I would put in the maximum amount that you think you might pay, assuming they were part-time the full way through. And then in the job description, you can articulate that there. We intend to start part-time and then move to casual employment halfway through or at whatever point. Okay, the next question, can you review again the wage match comment? Could funding for expenses be sought like participation grant, community foundations, or Jumpstart? So the wage match is, this program provides 100% wage subsidy to the youth up to $10,000. So for the dates that the youth is working in this program, CPRA would pay 100% of their salary up to that cap. You wouldn't, for instance, be able to extend the work term by paying them half-time and having the other 50% subsidized elsewhere, that this would be a compressed work term and we would pay 100% of the salary during that time. I see that was a question from Sarah. If you have a follow-up question to that, maybe you can ask your regional manager in the breakout session. The next question, we only have a contractor working for the association. Can the student be hired as a contractor as well? So the youth does not have to be a student, and they can be hired on contract, of course. I'm not sure what the hiring policies are at your particular organization, but we would ask that the youth be hired as you would any other employee. And if you have specific questions related to that, again, you can ask your regional manager or reach out to myself directly. There was another question, I believe someone put in the chat about maximum of 2 youth for an organization. Yes, so in 2022, we hope to support about 200 youth across Canada in this program. And I would say interest and early indicators are that there's going to be a fair amount of competition for those 200 spots. So in order to ensure that we engage with and support as many communities as possible, we ask that only 2 youth per applicant be proposed. The next question asks about multiple positions in different departments. How would we like that explained in the job description? That job description repeats itself. So when you apply for 2 youth, there's 2 things that pop up. You can talk about each job separately. And following that, can we hire 2 positions, one that starts and ends, and then another begins and ends the following year? I'm not entirely clear on that question. The application period right now, we're asking for people to apply for positions that would start April 1, 2020 and would end no later than March 31st, 2023. So if in that 12-month period, those 2 youth would be working, then I would ask that you submit for 2 youth. If the second youth you're thinking about would go beyond those dates, that would be in next year's call for applications that you would submit that request. One more thing to add, I think it's important before we break that everyone has this information. The work term can be anytime. It does not have to start April 1st. It can start as early as then, but you can propose a youth starting in the fall. You can propose a youth starting in the winter of next year. So think about that and in your organizational planning where you might have capacity to take on a project like this and where youth involvement might be most valuable for your organization. Okay, I think that's it for general questions. Thank you to those of you who submitted them. We now have about, I'm going to call about 20 minutes for breakout sessions, but I'll pop around and see how conversations are going. And if there's keen interest to come back as a whole group to talk about some of the things that we raise, we can certainly do that. A few more to join us back from their breakout rooms. They should be back in another 10 seconds or so. Hopefully that was valuable. You had a chance to meet with your regional managers and exchange some contact information. Their email addresses are there on the holding slide, so you can reach them if there were some questions that come up along the way. And it looks like most of us are almost back. Great. Okay, welcome back. So a couple of things, a couple of questions that I heard a few times over that I thought we would just reiterate to the group. One was around the additional supports for youth. So of course we might, you might not know what those additional supports are yet at the time of application. So if you don't request them in the application request, that's okay. If you are a recipient of a grant opportunity and something comes up when you do finally hire that youth and you realize that additional supports might be valuable, reach out to your regional manager with a request and an amount of support that would be required, and we will review that on a case-by-case basis. There was another question that came in. If a community is requesting 2 youth or 2 jobs, is it possible that, like, would they be approved for both or nothing? No, they could be approved for just 1. So submit up to 2 requests, but it's possible that when we review, we'll offer funding for 1 of the 2 jobs that you do ask for. And again, that just goes to help ensure that we're reaching as many communities as possible. There was a question about requests from last year as well that came up. How many applications came in? How many requests were there? How many youth actually got hired through the program? And I will look at that shortly. If memory serves, we had about 300 requests come in, and 76 youth were funded from those 300 requests. So we expect that number to increase slightly this year, but in turn, we also have more subsidies available this year. So we have about 200 available for 2022. So there is lots of funding that will be available this year, and we will do our very best to ensure that it's distributed fairly across the country. And one other question that came in was a couple of things. What kind of jobs are we talking about? And that was a really good question, and we haven't touched upon that directly. So on our website, if you go to cpra.ca/mentorship, and if I just scroll back on my slideshow here to this page, at the bottom of that list, under Youth Employment Experience, you'll see just below application form is a tab called Success Stories. And that is a tab that features all sorts of youth that were employed in the program this year. They're PDF articles that we had made to feature some youth who are working in this program this year. So that might give you some inspiration for different types of jobs that youth could do that would be eligible for this kind of funding. There should be one up for almost every province and territory at this point, but we're just working on the last few in the next coming weeks. Certainly in the park spaces, lots of trails, trail guides or trail maintenance or land interpreters, that sort of work. And in recreation, program leaders, camp leaders, community outreach workers, that kind of thing. Those were all popular last year, but there's lots in there, and hopefully that provides a little bit of inspiration for you. If there are any final questions, please do feel free to put your hand up. I'm going to stop sharing this now. Any other final questions? I don't see. Well, thank you everyone for joining today and for taking an hour to go through the application form with us. This will be available for you on our YouTube site. So the recording will go up on YouTube. You can reference it back anytime. For those of you who would prefer to submit in French or would like to reach our Francophone team, they will be hosting a similar webinar next Tuesday at 1:15 Eastern. Pierre and Rémi and Sophie that you met today in the Quebec region room will be part of that webinar. So you'll see their faces again next week. And again, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. Thank you. Good luck with your applications, and we look forward to reviewing them. Bye for now.